All right, guys. So we're just here going to talk about MP47's vehicle combat class. I've got Ben Taylor with me, Ed Catabay, who's come through the classes before, and Ricky. Call him the Ricky Bobby. And we're supposed to have Jasko. Looks like he's actually just starting to chime in here, so we'll add him in here. Nick, you there?
I am. You guys got me?
Yeah, so we're live, man. So we're just going to talk about the class, go over a couple things. Just want to discuss, like, we've had a lot of people that are like, well, why should we take this class? Is it too tactical oriented? Is it kind of like over the top for someone that's a concealed carry permit holder or just even, constitutional carry now? And the reality of it is like Ben can tell you with what we do for work, we see this stuff like every single day. And carjackings are way up. Everywhere you look, there is something going on with cars. It seems like high end theft, retail vehicles, Chargers, Challengers, Hellcats, whatever you can name it. But it's not really just that. It's pretty much everywhere across the board. Doesn't matter what kind of car it is. We all know about the Kias, the Hyundais, stuff like that. But so I just want to watch this. I want to show this video, and then we're going to talk about it. This is a video that I got sent earlier in the week. And we're just going to watch a brief portion of it, and then we're going to move on. All right, here we go, guys.
Hey, Alpha, how you doing?
Don't even get up. A Milwaukee area 5-star rideshare driver, armed with a gun, survives a carjacking attempt. This headline was in the news not too long ago, and it begs the question, should you carry a gun while you're driving? How should you carry while you're driving? And what a self-defense incident on the road may actually look like. In this video, we're breaking down that carjacking with the man himself and how he survived it. Hi, I'm Kevin Michalowski, Director of Content for the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. And I'm here with Scott Jaworowski. Correct. Got it good this time. And his attorney, Amy. Scott, we really wanted to talk to you about this incident. It happened right in our backyard. We're at our headquarters here in West Bend, and it was all over the news because you got good video on it. That's how it made the news. And we watched that video and we broke it down. But I want to get started first is, do you carry every day? And how long have you had your permit? And tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started down this path.
Sure. I do carry every day, whether when I'm out on the road, whether I'm just, out doing my business on a day-to-day basis. I do carry every day. I feel it's important to not only exercise my Second Amendment rights, but also to be able to protect myself and my family when we're out and about.
What sort of training did you get before you started carrying?
None really. I had gone ahead and I had bought my gun. I'd used guns for years. I'd grown up around rifles and shotguns, and I'd shot handguns a number of times over the years. When concealed carry became available in Wisconsin, I signed up for it pretty shortly after that point. So I could go ahead and concealed carry legally at that point.
So in watching the video, I see that these two men get in the back seat of your car and almost immediately press something against your back of your neck, behind you. Tell me how you felt at that moment and what was going through your mind.
When the guy behind me on the right-hand side got into the car at first, I didn't think anything else of it. It was like a normal passenger getting into the car. It wasn't until he jumped me from behind and started pressing something into the back of my neck that I realized this was no longer a normal ride share event. And at that point, I decided, okay, I needed to do something. I didn't know what they were going to do. I didn't know what he was pressing into the back of my neck. It turns out it was a cell phone, but at the time I had no idea of what it was. So I wasn't sure, if he was armed or not. I had his friend at the driver's side door was trying to pull me out of the car while he was trying to push me out of the car. My seatbelt was still on at that point in time.
So from a situational awareness standpoint, did you have your door locked? I mean, were you thinking about stuff like this prior to it happening?
When I saw them walk up, it looked like a normal ride share. The only difference to it being is they were masked, which given COVID, everybody's masked. And the only other thing that struck me as a little odd was they weren't making eye contact with me as I came up. But again, not in something that was.
All right, so I'm going to stop it there. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about this video? Ben?
So
Yeah, so the thing that sticks out to me, this situation kind of puts you in a little bit more of a pickle just with the job, right? Of hey, it's commonplace for him to let somebody in the car. He obviously noted something right away. The avoidance of eye contact, stuff that we look for on the street with doing other parts of our job, not even related to necessarily being just in our vehicles, but hey, that's not normal behavior for somebody. So he was already on some kind of level of alertness there with it, which good for him to stay in that frame of mind. The hey, I didn't know what was being pressed into me. I find that a little bit, I don't want to say concerning, but with the attorney there, I would have liked that to be a a little bit clearer of a point made. But
Yeah, I think he's clearly being cautious what he's saying there, right? Because it's obviously, if you were to watch this entire video, he does fire rounds off, and these guys take off running. So, what do you think, Ricky?
It's from the video, I know it was quick, but it kind of looks like, I know we've talked about this sometimes, it's almost impossible to draw your gun from the drop. It does look like he was being somewhat cautious, and I don't know where he was carrying or how he was carrying, but he didn't immediately go for his gun. And again, he didn't know if these guys were armed, so it looks like there was somewhat of a thought process that this guy went through before obviously engaging two guys that he did not know, and he didn't know what was happening. And all this obviously happened within seconds.
What do you think, Ed? Anything different? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment that you figure something is wrong, I mean, I think it's almost too late. I mean, your options are pretty much limited at that point. I mean, I don't even think I could even draw at that point, other than maybe just comply and wait for an opportunity. But by the time he even felt something on his neck, whether that's a gun or a cell phone, I mean, if it was a gun, it is too late. So, I mean, what can you actually do at that point?
Yeah, I think you guys are all on it. I think one thing with this is like people often mistake that, it's got to be necessary that you have to know 100% that it's going to be a firearm. This guy used a cell phone and put it to the back of his neck, like clearly implying that it could be a firearm, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't have handled the fire or handled the cell phone like it was a firearm. So I think one thing again is like Ben kind of alluded to is situational awareness. This guy was actually pretty decent compared to what I see. Typically people are looking at their phones, rideshare apps. He's confirming stuff on his phone. You would typically see that he's got the right customer, hitting that he picked this person up because he's got to get that good rating right because he wants to keep getting good customers or getting more customers based on his ratings. But overall, like I think this guy did fairly decent. One thing that always comes up is on-body carry versus off-body carry. In this situation, he actually jumps out of the car at one point and starts to interact with these guys. And when you see that, my question, and I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking it, but is what would you have done if, or what would have been his course of action had he left his keys in the car, which he obviously did, and the car was running and those guys just stayed in the car. Now they have his firearm and his car, and he's just a sitting duck. So kind of something he's got to think about. But overall, I think this was pretty good. And for people that think that this isn't going to happen to them, it can very easily happen to them. I forget exactly percentage wise, but we're from Ohio, right? And we're near Cleveland, and Cleveland is just getting crushed with carjacking after carjacking after carjacking. And it's not just Cleveland and Cuyahoga County; it's all over the U.S. So my counter to people like this guy, one thing that stuck out to me is he just goes, when he talked about his training, he has a very similar response that everybody else does too. Is, well, I didn't really have any training. I kind of just bought my gun and kind of hope for the best is what I got out of that. And
I've been around guns all my life, he said, pretty much.
Yeah,
I've been around
right.
rifles and shotguns.
So it's a huge false sense of security to me that we see almost every single class where we have people come out and at the end of the class, they're like, my mind's blown kind of thing, right? It's one of my favorite classes to teach. And so we'll kind of get into our class, why we should take the course. I'm a huge fan of vehicle combat. And I'm going to ask Ed because Ed's gone through the class. And, you've gone through one or two, Ed?
Two.
Okay. So can you kind of just tell people that may watch this or be watching now what was good about the class, what you took away from the class, and what you think should be happening within this class.
Yeah, I mean, my background, I have never shot in or around a vehicle. My training was basically flat range indoors, shooting at stationary targets. So to have that dynamic of moving around, finding an opportunity to shoot, that kind of changes the game a little bit, and it's very humbling because what you're used to doing of just shooting, uh, in a stall in the indoor range, it's not that difficult. So when you go into a vehicle situation, it just you're thinking about 1,000 different things. Is my muzzle pointed in the right direction? Am I shooting through something I can shoot through, like the door, the windows? You know, am I exposing myself? There's a lot of factors that go through your mind, and it's good to just get that out through practice instead of waiting till the last second when you actually have to use those skills.
Agreed. So, Nick, you've gone through the class too. You've helped out in the classes before. You got anything to add to what he's saying about the class?
Yeah, I think it's like anything. I mean, if you're going to prepare for it, you have to practice it, right? You can't just wing it on the day of. It almost never works out the way you would hope it would if you haven't pre-planned and at least run some scenarios through your own mind as to, okay, if this, then what? What will my action or reaction be, right? So it's real hard to know what you would do in a situation like that when you've never experienced it before.
I think one thing that's unique about this class is I really 100% love the people that show up in their concealed carry gear, because the reality of it is, like I tell students, you're not going to show up unless you're a cop. You're not coming every single day or getting in a car every single day wearing a training belt with 2 or 3 mag pouches, a rifle mag carrier, and you're just not simply doing that unless you're freaking Rambo or something, right? But the people that show up and actually do carry their concealment holsters and consider the application of their ammo, what they have. Do they have 25 rounds? Do they have, a guy that shows up at a class with a Glock 43X, so he has 10 rounds? What is the ammo consideration after you fire? And stats show this 6 to 7 to 8 rounds through the same hole in the windshield before you start carving away and getting accuracy where you want it, right? Because we have deflection of the bullet going through the glass, and same thing, outside in, we have deflection also. So, Ben, you might remember the Solon officer involved shooting years ago. And the guy, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the officer actually got hit in the badge, if I remember correctly. And,
in the badge and in the vest.
Yeah, and then he actually did some work, and he went to town and fired through the windshield. And Ed, if you remember this, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, but where do the bullets go when they are deflecting from inside the car? When you fire from inside the vehicle, where do the bullets go typically?
Inside out should go angle up.
They go up, correct. How about if you're outside the car firing in?
Outside in, that bullet's going towards, it's going down.
Yeah. So I think one thing about vehicle combat classes, I've seen a ton of these, and if people were to ask me why take our class compared to someone else's, and I'm going to be honest, I really preach the accuracy part of it too. Not just spraying bullets on a target. We simply evaluate every single target at the end of each shooter's course of fire. And we want to have them feel what it feels like to be inside the car when rounds are fired. But we're going to give a ballistic demonstration at the start of the class to let everyone see and feel for themselves how much of a deflection a bullet's going to take. Do things change based on bullet size, bullet weight, whatever? Yeah, of course they do, right? Do they change if it's laminated glass, if it's tempered glass? What happens with tempered glass, Ricky? Does it break, shatter?
Yeah, it shatters,
right? How does window tint affect these kinds of things, right? Window tint almost acts like laminated glass. If you've done enough training around cars and vehicles, it's pretty hard to shatter a window correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, if it has window tint on it, it just kind of almost acts like laminated glass and just kind of spider glasses out, right? Or spider webs out. So there's a lot of things that people don't understand, and we try to explain that to them in the simplest way possible. But using cover and concealment, what is cover, what is concealment around the cars, a lot of people have no clue, right? And I think that when we do the ballistic demonstrations, people get to see that, and they see that it's where they think is cover is really not, and they see those bullets going through the car, and they're like, "Wow, I probably shouldn't stand here." And we try to show students, in my mind, a simple approach to being as safe as they possibly can. Can you mitigate every single risk? No, right? We're not asking you to walk through the parking lot like you're doing a SWAT takedown on a car. Okay, but there is simple things like keeping your head out of your phone, hitting the unlock button right when you get to the car, as opposed to walking 4,000 feet to your car and after you've hit the button and letting everyone know you're going to your car, right? There's a lot of things that people don't think about that we try to cover in this class. So you guys got anything to add about the class that you think was good, bad? I know, Ben, you were hurt last year for the one class, but anything you want to chime in on that you think is good or that we cover in the class?
Yeah, just whether it be cops or civilians, just any kind of additional gear loadout is one thing I like. We discuss, you talk about medical stuff. You're putting holes into something, or if you're getting a hole put into you, you got to be able to patch that up. Just going over where you're keeping that kind of gear and thinking through, obviously the focus of the class is movement, in and around the vehicle. Am I going to be able to get to this? Is this a reasonable spot to have this? For the cops, we work with a computer stand and a giant center console in the car. How does that affect my ability to move around inside of the vehicle? Just getting the hot wash of it, of going through it and saying, hey, this really works well for me. This absolutely sucks. Just being able to work out some of those first thought kinks, so that, unlike this gentleman here who, no training, his first time working through it, when it's actually happening, you at least get to run through one of those, 1 minute mindset prep situations and go, hey, this went great here. I'm going to change this though. If, something were to ever happen, or I'm going to try this on my next run to see if this helps, and kind of give you that ability to dissect and diagnose. So
I think a lot of it too comes down with the way that this class is designed, the way that I've developed the curriculum is whether you're plainclothes. So if you're a plainclothes officer, great class, right? Because you're in your car all the time, surveillance details, whatever the case may possibly be. I guarantee you, unless you're at like one of the top tier agencies around this area, which most of us aren't, right? I can guarantee you that you do not train in and around vehicles or anything like that from a plainclothes perspective. Half or more of the departments, being honest, patrol guys probably don't get to train this at all. And if they do, maybe once every couple of years, right? Because there's a lot of logistics to it, cars, vehicles. It's dangerous, right? We're actually firing live rounds and seeing how they react around the cars. But I think that this curriculum is designed to really just get people to understand the basic fundamentals of fighting around a vehicle. Having an idea of what you would do if you were at the red light and you got tapped from behind by someone else's car. Should I stay in the car? Should I get out of the car and look at the car? What are the best options? And we run 3 to 4 scenarios in the class. We make everyone go through it, and we will, diagnose what's going on with the student, and we'll talk to them afterwards. And I think that a lot of guys, they get so worked up just thinking about all the things like Ed said. There's a lot to think about while you're doing this. Reloads, malfunctions, all these things. Like, how many times in the classes have you been to, Ben, or that I've ran that, we see students that are literally pressing the trigger to their gun and their slide is locked back, and they've pressed the trigger like 5-6 times. They just have no clue of what is really going on because the stimulus is just overwhelming to them. So I really like that part of it. Let's talk about how we actually design the class and how the schedule goes. So one of the things that works with this is that we typically we do a different scenario of where we're going to have a guy start out dry fire, right? And we're going to get on the range, work weapon positions, carry positions, things like that of that nature. And then from there, we typically are going to go to seated draws and go from that positions and kind of go from that part of it. So just real quick, Ben, if you can you explain how the first part of the course went the day that we did it over at C4? Would have been like a year now.
Yep. Everybody will start, a simple fold out chair, get some rounds on paper, get comfortable with the draw for it. Make sure obviously red dots, stuff gets bumped around. Guys aren't checking it maybe as much as they should. Check some zero on pistols, make sure everything's working properly before we get into that kind of environment. And then go into the vehicle, start seeing what is actually cover, what is actually concealment, what is worth your time based on the threat that you might be having posed to you. After that, start going over basic things like removing the seatbelt with the gun already out, discussing, like what you said earlier, trajectory through windows and through different paneling of the vehicle, and then start putting individuals inside of the vehicle, have them start doing individual runs to start getting exposed to, single threat from this position or this location or this scenario, and then escalating into, a multiple target, moving around not only the vehicle that you started in, but other vehicles getting introduced later in the day.
So I'm going to show this video, guys. And this is just kind of how we started. Like, we're going to go over carry, positions. We're going to go over SEWL, low ready, low carry, SEWL, right? High ready, things like that. We cover it in the class. But temple index is a hot topic, right? Do you have to have a temple index in the car? I'm going to be honest. My answer has changed on this. I was taught temple index, right? However, does it work? And is it the most effective way to run? Is it the most effective way to manipulate your firearm? I'm not so sure that it is. I think that it comes down to the clientele that you have, of who you have in the class, right? Because I am a good fan, or I am a huge fan of keeping the gun almost at like a 45-degree angle, right? But keeping it out in front of my face where I can still, or under my face where I can still see what's going on, and to be able to move a little bit more aggressively without necessarily doing the super tactical turns, right? That being said, depending on who's in your class and clientele, it's a much safer approach for me as the instructor to have people keep that muzzle designated straight up, right? And I don't have to worry about someone flagging somebody necessarily while they're running across the line like this or whatever the case is. But I want to show this video. This is one of the most common things that I see in this class that guys reach back out to me and say that this has been a huge takeaway for them, especially cops. No one, and I mean nobody, hardly ever trains this. Just the simple fact of drawing your firearm without muzzling yourself in the car. If you're a cop, you have all kinds of stuff inside the center console of your car, right? Siren box, rifles sometimes are up in the front. Still, a lot of police departments are using the rifle mounts in the front of the cars. We'll get to that at another time, but I'm a huge fan of keeping them in the back. That's another day. Yep. We'll talk about that later. But this is how we would start the class. Once we get going, dry fire, we hit the live fire stuff. We kind of get into just a presentation of the gun out of the holster. So I'm gonna put this up here, guys. So it's pretty basic stuff, right? But we're watching students simply draw and reholster the gun. We're looking for students not to come across their legs, muzzle themselves, right? What happens when the stimulus is taking place? So what happens is we typically see people begin to kind of get a little worked up, right? And they kind of tend to, in my mind, they get so worked up as we're calling out numbers or we're calling out whatever the case is, that they actually seem to forget that they need to control that trigger still and keep their finger off the trigger until they're ready to fire the gun, right? Simple, basic firearm rules. But we don't see that a lot, right? And so this is a great way for them just to start learning how to draw from either an appendix or 3 or 4 o'clock. If you're a left-hander, obviously it's going to be on the other side. But a lot of guys never train this. When I worked at Mark Cruiser still, I would typically, or even when I am in a Mark Cruiser still, I will still draw before I hit the road. I mean, I just want to make sure that as I draw my gun, my steering wheel is where It's going to be in a position to where I'm not going to knock my gun's muzzle on the bottom of the steering wheel as I'm trying to draw the gun up, right? My seatbelt positioning, is it properly over in my holster where I can get the gun out? Is it under my holster? What am I doing? You know what I mean? Getting all my fitment done before I actually put the car in drive and take off. Same thing applies if you're a concealed carry holder. You know, I think that's a huge thing that people don't really think about, is how they're set up in the car. You know, we get a lot of people. I like to see people in the classes just sit in the class or just sit in the car seat, and I let them do their thing first, just to see what their anticipated or what their regular school of thought is with it, right? And it's typically not what I would recommend, but for the guys that are like squared away, they obviously get it, right? But if you go back probably 2 or 3 classes ago, and I'd have to pull it up, but we actually had a video where we took a video camera, I think it was a GoPro or something, put it inside the car. And I wanted the data of watching people draw their firearm out. And once we got past all the dry fire and the live fire from seated positions and putting them in the car then, and actually seeing them draw the gun out. And it was awesome data because a lot of guys did not realize what they were doing, you know, and realizing that as they were drawing from 3 or 4 o'clock, they were still bringing the gun across their bodies with the muzzle, not necessarily pointed up. So we teach students as they draw the firearm to get the muzzle pointed up immediately as soon as they can, so that as they have the muzzle up, they can still cross their body, but we're not pointing down towards our legs, which contain major arteries, right? And that gets into the discussion about tourniquets. Where do most people get hit at around cars, Ricky? Where do they get hit at the most? Arms and legs, right? So arms and legs, our limbs contain major arteries. Where do we put tourniquets at on?
Limbs.
Put tourniquets on arms and legs, right? So you got to make sure, like as part of this class, we like to make students, you know, put on a tourniquet, tell them, hey, you just got hit in the arm. What are you going to do? And this year, it's the first year that we're going to do this, but we're offering a 2-day class. And that second day is going to include a lot of medical considerations, right? Low light, possibly, depending on the schedule. Also, it's going to really harp into making you think outside the box, right? Finding a new position, finding some new cover. When do you top off your gun? All those things. And potentially, you know, an LE version of this, we get into deploying the rifle and stuff like that. So, Ed, you got anything to add?
No, I think you touched on most of it. Like you said, the biggest thing for me was that muzzle and drawing it. It's not one of those things that you typically do practice with. Typically, when I step out through the day, I'm practicing my dry fire standing up, but not typically from, you know, a seated position. So getting those reps in and making sure you're doing it correctly is key.
Ricky?
Rick. Just kind of touching back on like how the students are, as far as like information that they get from the class, how overwhelmed they are. Not in a negative way either. It's just they're encountering things that they never thought of before. And it actually amazes me, like a lot of the times when we do run those scenarios, how gassed these guys are. And they've only shot maybe 25, 30 rounds, a couple of magazines, and you end the drill and you literally see them out of breath because of the overload that they just went through and the fact that they've never experienced that before. And again, like it makes them think, because this is obviously we're engaging paper targets, we're engaging cardboard. This is not somebody shooting back at us. So you can literally see these students like run the reality of those kind of scenarios through their head.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing to actually mention is that, you know, it's an overwhelming class in the fact that it's something you don't do on a regular basis. So I'm not into, you know, as the owner of the company, I'm not into this whole, like, let's just stand and shoot at targets and make you feel good about yourself kind of thing, right? If you want to train with somebody that does that, fine, find somebody else. I am not your guy. Okay. While I would love your business, I'm just not that guy. We're going to practice and train to a real life standard as much as possible. And we're going to try to get you to shoot fast, try to get you to shoot accurately, be accountable still, right? And think. You know, thinking is a huge thing that I think is overlooked. I know it sounds dumb, but it's overlooked. It's drastically overlooked in police work. How many times, Ben, when you're qualifying, do you hear draw and fire 3 rounds, center mass within 5 seconds? You could pretty much do it with your eyes closed at this point.
Yep.
So, if you're looking for a class where you're going to not challenge yourself and you just, want to feel good about yourself and you want to shoot perfect targets, don't come to my class. All right. I know that sounds harsh, but, that's kind of where we're at. Like, I'm beyond that, where we want to make people feel necessarily good about themselves. I know that sounds in a bad way. It's probably not a big business approach to this, but at the same time, we have classes designed to get your fundamentals squared away, pistol skill solutions courses, red dot pistol performance, stuff like that, where we can get you squared away to where you'll feel very confident in your skill set. Ed, I mean, how many times did you come out and train with us to start with, and now you're shooting matches? You're shooting
Right.
more matches than I am now. That's awesome. So and correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably didn't really feel super, super confident when you first started shooting with us, correct?
Yeah, definitely not. You ironed out a lot of mistakes that I had a lot of bad habits. I just didn't know that I had those habits. But going through your classes, I knew what to work on, and I had like those the information so that I could self-diagnose after, and that was key for me.
Yeah, I mean, even when I first met Rick, I mean, the first time I met you was at another company's class, and it was like, I could tell you were hungry to be a really good shooter. And I look back at it now, and I'm like, the work you put in, it's definitely seen, right? You're super fast, you're super accurate now, which is great. A lot of guys would, tell you that it's not necessary to do that, blah blah blah. I mean, I think it's awesome. I love seeing my dudes crush it, and I think it's great. Ben, the same thing. I mean, for me, in my mind, we have a similar mindset as far as, representing police officers, law enforcement across the board, being good shooters, because the reality of it is most of them aren't, and I don't think it's anything that's over the top aggressive. It's just that, if you're going to carry a firearm every single day, you better be proficient at it. And if your ticket's pulled, you better be prepared for it. And,
Thing I
if
always
you're not,
ask myself and tell everybody to ask themselves too, civilian side or otherwise, if you were in a shootout and you were calling for a buddy, would you call yourself? And if your answer isn't yes, I would call myself, well, then maybe you need to evaluate where you're at. So
exactly. So the only other thing that I got for you guys and the rest of if anyone else is watching here, we do have the signups are coming up. We have the class, 1-day vehicle combat class is only going to be offered once this year. Our 2-day version is coming up later in the summer. So if you're interested in doing 2 days, it'll be the full kit and caboodle. 1 day is kind of the entry level, and 1 day will not hurt you at all if you plan on taking the 2-day. It'll be a little bit better suited for you, I think, if you start with the 1 day, then hit up the 2-day version of it. As far as that goes, if you guys want to sign up, you guys can sign up on the website. It's on the calendar, on the courses. It's in the store. It's pretty much everywhere on the website, all these courses. So we'll leave you guys with that. Ben, I appreciate you coming out, Ed and Rick.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what happened Nick here, but we'll catch you guys on the next one. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
See you.